Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is December 7th, 2021, and today's guest is one of my buddies, Kevin Groves. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and today's episode is 191. And as you can tell, I am under the weather. I feel like absolute dog crap, but it is what it is. And throughout this podcast, you might hear a cough or two, but hey, bear with me a little bit. Just it's going around. I don't have COVID. I can still taste and I can still smell. I have a head cold that my daughter gave me, and we're good. We are good. So today's podcast is a good one. Like I said earlier, I got a buddy of mine, Kevin Groves, on. He's a local guy to me here. He shot an awesome buck this year on the ground here in Michigan using a decoy. So this podcast is really cool in the fact that, like, Kevin's went through a lot in the last couple years as far as struggling with equipment, struggling with killing deer, as far as like getting into the moment of truth, but not sealing the deal. And we break that all down. Like, he knows it. He admits it, and he's really tried to take the next step to be able to be successful. And it's starting right now. So it's a really cool podcast. Awesome story as well. So we get into all that. It's really cool. Also, just a couple housekeeping things real quick. Exodus trail cams, Christmas is coming. You guys go over to exodusoutdoorgear.com and pick up a camera, either a cell cam or a regular trail cam, and they've got a lot of accessories as well. Pick up one of those for Christmas. They're awesome cameras. Check them out. Tell them I sent you, and go get one and make your hunter happy for this Christmas. So that being said, thank you guys for all the support and all the downloads. Please go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a written review. If you go in there, click on the Fall Podcast, scroll down, and it says write a review. Click on write a review. Just say hi if you want, or just say I love the podcast or I hate it. So I'm just hoping that each week you get an hour mental vacation from the Fall Podcast, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So thank you guys very much, and we're going to get over to this interview with Kevin. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast, and today's guest is a local guy, one of my buddies, Kevin Groves. Kevin, hey man, thanks for coming on and doing this.
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. I've been looking forward to this too because, you have been, like every hunter out there, went through some struggles. You know what I mean? And you know that, and everybody else knows that. And you find everything's been starting to click the last couple years. And you did something pretty cool this year. You killed a really good buck in Michigan on the ground. And I don't even know the story yet. You won't even tell me the damn story. So,
well, you did. I didn't want to tell it till we were on here, just because you'll ask a lot better questions.
Yeah,
hearing it for the first time.
Definitely. Well, for everybody out there that doesn't know who the hell you are, who are you and what do you do?
Well, like you said, my name's Kevin Groves. I'm not too far away from where you live. We grew up in the same neighborhood. I'm a dairy farmer. So I spend a lot of time outside, looking around at deer. I got 2 kids, and I actually just had my second kid on my birthday, which is the day before bow season. So that was...
Man, you didn't plan that out very well.
No, we didn't. I didn't want to say anything leading up into it, but I was just like, wife, in my head, we're getting real close to having a kid during bow season.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. You can't look at like when they're born. You got to look at for the next 20 years. Like your opening day might be out for you.
I just plan on brainwashing her enough that she just wants to bow hunt.
There you go.
As much as I do. So
there you go. Force her to do things that she doesn't probably want to do.
She'll appreciate it when she's older.
For sure. Well, cool, man. I'm glad we could hook up here and do this. And let's break down a little bit for everybody listening of the areas that you hunt and you farm, it's a lot like my 1 acre farm. It's farm country. Like, break down, the area that you're honing in on and ultimately you've cut your teeth on.
Well, I started hunting here when I was a kid, and the farm itself is it's around 800 acres, but it's all fields and fence rows. We've got that much acreage, and we've only got like 40 or 50 acres of woods. Yep. And it's all little 5 acre, 6 acre, and a few of the woods, well, half the woods is a park. Me and you could play catch with a baseball from one end of it to the other. That's how, open it is.
Right.
So there's not a lot of cover. And when the crops come off, we lose a lot of deer. They just, they head elsewhere because the cover disappears. Once the cover's gone, the food's gone. And then I hunted some. When I actually started to actually get serious somewhat with hunting, I was hunting out west of town where we live, and that was 240 acres, all woods, and that was completely different than where I grew up hunting. So that was a whole new learning curve, learning hunt there. And I shot one of my better bucks with my rifle there. And so that really made me, like the buddies that we hunted with, we both went from hunting like farm country out there. And it took us 5 years before we even started to figure out, like, oh yeah, the deer like to bed over here. And oh yeah, this is a good pinch point. And
it's a big learning curve. Going from that, but now coming back from that, because we quit hunting that 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was, and now coming back to this, I think it's made it a lot easier 100%
to come back to this open ground and be like, well, no doubt the deer is going to walk down this fence row. It's the only point to get from that wood line to that wood line. Like, sit here, stupid.
It could definitely, and that's something I have too, because I've got a 218 acre piece that's all timber, and then I've got the 1 acre, which it's 120 acres, but it's all farmland. And I find it the same way. Like, I find learning the stuff in the big wood stuff makes it easier in the farm country, but it's got its challenges too. Getting into pieces like in farm country is difficult to enter and exit, unscathed, where deer can't see and you're not blowing the whole thing. I guess my question to you is, since you've hunted both, what do you like better, big woods or farm country?
Well, I've been dipping my toes into public the last couple years, and I really like that big woods stuff. I just never know what's going to be coming, around the bend in the big woods, just because you can't see.
Right.
Like, there's times where I sit out here, and we have this one stand we call the Eberhardt stand, and you can see for a half mile everywhere, and you see bucks every night, but you're just, if there's no deer walking your way, there's nothing coming, because you can see a half mile away. So,
yep. I like that though too. I like that in the fact because you get to see bucks and shooter bucks do what they do. So right. I feel like the learning, like it's almost expedited in a way. Like, you learn more about deer behavior, because like in the big woods, and the farm that I grew up hunting. I've hunted it until, I still hunt it, but it's, till 2016. I haven't hunted any farm country, but like, that's what I cut my teeth on. And you might go a whole season and only see 2 bucks that you might shoot. And so it can be real monotonous. It can be really like just sitting there looking at the same trees, not learning anything about deer behavior. So I do love seeing that deer behavior, see what they do, and be able to, in the rut, vocalize with them. You can call them. You can, kind of get down in their space and get them to come over to you.
Yeah, I love that part for sure during the rut. I think you've said it before. Gas and glassing.
Yep.
Like, I do that all the time. Come the rut on the farm, I get done milking in the morning, and I don't have time to get out in the stand, but I can, take the kid to daycare and go drive around the section for an hour.
Yep.
And you figure out real quick, I got to go sit and stand over here tonight, or, I can make a play on that deer. I'm going to grab my decoy and get over here and try to cut him off. And it doesn't always work out. You've got to have the right wind. He's got to be in the right piece of cover. You got to be able to get in there without him seeing you or the doe seeing you. So there is that aspect that is a lot. You do get to get in the game a lot more when you can see them from a long ways away.
Yep.
It compared to the big woods. Well, I can put it this way. I've been trying to, hunt. I haven't hunted real hard on public. I've done a couple hunts every year, and I've yet to see a shooter buck on stand. But I've got deer on camera that are worth going after. I just haven't had the time to like fully or as you'd say, you don't leave deer to go find deer.
Yep.
So
it's hard for me to do that, and you and I've had that discussion before. Like I get good bucks and I see bucks on stand and get opportunities on private, and it's like the burning inside my belly. I want to do public at the core of me, like I want to, but like you just said, you made a good point. Public takes time, like time you got to dedicate to it. Like I feel like in private, I can go out and jump at a stand or do a hang and hunt or whatever, because I know the area, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it might be settling, but I just know there's good bucks there, and I know that it's convenient until I can get that time to go do some public, and it might be next year. I say that every year, it might be next year, but I do know when you make that jump, like because I do a lot of out of state hunting too. When you make that jump to try something different, woods that you've never been a part of or know, your learning just gets expedited. And in a season, you could learn in one season what you've learned in 10 years around here, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So now when you've stepped foot on public around here and you've thrown some sits at the last couple of years, have you learned more, even though you haven't seen a shooter buck from the stand, have you learned more like in a quicker pace than you think you have growing up doing the same thing?
Yeah, I think so for sure, because, I may not be seeing these deer, but I'm learning, why I'm not seeing those deer. Like after I've been trying to get boots on the ground, like a lot of the time this year, I'm going up there to try to hunt, and it's like, I'll take my bow and I'm going to just take my saddle and my sticks and I'm going to walk in here, but I'm going to try to like just walk as much as I can and maybe not settle for a spot, but I just want to learn the area. Like, mm-hmm. I haven't even really seriously gone into that spot yet and been like going in for the kill. Like I've got it figured out. Like, I found the bedding area. This is where all the scrapes are at. Like I haven't found that spot yet. I found some pinch points that the deer were using during the rut, and it told me like, okay, there's some good deer in here that I need to figure out.
Right.
So I guess I haven't had the opportunity to learn much on stand, but I haven't spent a lot of time on stand. I spent a lot of time with, I always hear, spend more time scouting than you do sitting. And I think, I've been trying to do that, and you learn a lot doing that. That's for sure.
I agree. And that's something that I struggled with, and I've really tried to implement the last 2 years, more of like scouting, like you talked about the gas and glass. I gas and glass around here constantly. Like I maybe have sat, I haven't sat much this year at all, but, as far as hours on stand, but I maybe have sat only 3 or 4 mornings this year, and only mm-hmm. I don't even think I've sat one morning yet here in Michigan, to be honest with you. But like I still feel like I'm sitting when I drive around and I'm looking. Like I've done that just about every morning in the first 5 days of the rut, and you just see so much and you learn so much, and you can make a play. Like I made a play on it, and you did too. Like we're going to get into that here in a little bit, but like I just think that's just as valuable, but it is hard to get your mindset to that where it's like you want to be in the stand. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to kill him from the truck. Well, you could, but legalities kind of run into that. So
well, there's also like a lot of times I get, well, you're just driving around. What you got to get out there if you're going to kill them. And it's like, gosh, like I get it, but like you can go burn your spots up too if you're just being like, I got to get in the stand. I got to get in the stand. I can learn just as much from driving around the section in the morning. I can learn more than going sitting in one stand or just being like, I have to go sit. Yep. Well, I might burn that spot out, and then I'm pigeonholed to just sitting in that tree, staring out into that one field. And I know not everybody's, situation is like mine, that you've got a couple sections you can go drive around and you've got permission and, you got property that you can go hunt on. So not everybody's got almost 1,000 acres to go drive around and, Oh, I got to go check this property. I go check that property. But I mean, you don't need that much property to go do it. I mean, if you've got a couple different spots, there's so many times, like my cousin, a couple years ago, he ended up not finding the deer, but I was driving around that morning and he was coming up early for some reason. And I'm like, get in the truck. Like, there's a buck out in this cornfield and he's with a doe. And I watched him run right by the stand. I'm like, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to drop you off and you're going to walk back to that stand. 20 minutes later, he calls me, I shot the buck. Well, you don't get that opportunity if you're either not in the stand or you're just at home or you're sitting in a stand.
Yep. And I think if we're comparing and contrasting big woods to farm country that works. Big country, I not saying it doesn't work, but I will say you probably need to get in the stand in the mornings and get in boots on the ground because you can't see obviously as much, but I love being able to see. I love, it happens to everybody. It's like, man, I've had this buck on camera, been watching him in the beans all summer. Where did he go? You do a loop around the section and it's like, oh, there he is. He's on so-and-so's property. He's shifted a little bit south. It's like, okay. Right. Then that you learn that too. You learn like how deer use in areas and, I just think the learning curve, you can expedite it so quickly and learn so much.
You get an inventory of what's around in the area too. Like, what was I going to say? The deer this year, driving around all summer and all fall this year, we didn't really have that good of a year for bucks around here. We had a couple decent that were close to 130, and then the neighbor shot the one. So then it really like opened my, I was like, I got to try some different stuff this year. I'm like, the deer really aren't on the farm you don't see all the deer, but I had a pretty good idea that there wasn't that 140 that we have running around every year. So it made me a lot easier for me to try a couple different things and branch out a little bit this year.
Yep, definitely. Well, let's pivot a little bit here. So, let's kind of break down when you kind of really started you've hunted your whole life, but when did you take that leap of like, I'm invested? Like, you always feel like you're invested. You and I've talked about it. I felt like I was really invested when I was in high school and college, but I wasn't. You know what I mean? It's like I really got invested after college, and I hunted all the time, but I thought like, it just wasn't. I wasn't that serious about it. So when did you get real serious and was like, I'm investing everything into this and I'm going to go forward with it?
Oh, it was probably as recently as like 4 or 5 years ago. I sat one morning and I saw a buck come out of this little woodlot and he came to check this scrape. And I called my buddy and I'm like, I got to get a stand over there where this scrape was at. So let's go. I got a ladder stick in a stand, not mobile at all. And we'll go throw it up. Well, we busted through this bean field at like 11 in the morning, put up the set. Wasn't quiet at all. Well, I went and sat it. Went and sat it that night. Lo and behold, he comes right back out and checks that scrape, and I shot him. No and I was way. Just like, yeah. And right then I was like, whoop, this is it. This is the way I want to hunt. Like, I want to take the fight to the deer. I just don't want to sit in. I don't want to set up 3 tree stands, every summer and just go rotate between, more than 3, but just rotate between, 4, 5, 8 stands.
Yep.
So it was probably then when it really clicked and I was just like, yep, this is how I want to do things.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
that was like your light bulb moment. Like, shit, man, I can do this. This is fun. This is a new challenge.
Right. And yeah, that was the moment where I was like, I want to really start taking this seriously. Like you said, I always thought I was taking it seriously. Like, oh yeah, we're a big deer hunter. We deer hunt with all my buddies every fall and been doing it for years but never really like looking into like studying. Like every night I'm at home looking on the Onyx, like cruising through public ground around me and like, oh, that looks like a little good pinch point. Oh, that swamp's got a little spot there. And, it seems like every night I'm at home now, like watching YouTube videos and yep. grinding through Onyx. And, I think I've got every hunting app you can have on my phone. Like, I'm glad my wife doesn't listen to me. She probably seen all the money I spend on hunting subscriptions every year.
Hey, it's better than porn, I would think, right? Unless you might have, right. Unless you have a porn subscription too.
No, I don't have one of those. I don't Who pays for that shit? Who's got a membership? I don't know if I want to meet the guy that's got a membership for that.
Oh God, let's not get into that. It's gonna take a weird turn. Oh, so as of recently, you've really taken that next step in trying to do the mobile thing, but you've also you've had some struggles as far as like equipment goes, with a bow and stuff like that. Like, kind of break that down and your bumps and bruises along the road that you've kind of went through, your ebbs and flows.
Yeah, struggles to say the least. So like when I shot that buck, I was using a crossbow, and I had wounded some deer before that. I wounded the first year I came back to work on the farm was 7 years ago, I think. And that first fall, coming back from hunting the big woods, so it was 7 years ago. I come back to hunt the farm. The first fall, I had my regular bow, and I wounded a 130-some inch endpoint. And then the fall after that, I wounded another nice buck. And then I'm like, screw this.
This is with a compound, right?
Well, this is with a compound.
Yep.
This is with a compound. And then I get to that year, I shoot the crossbow. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. And then the year after that, I wounded one. And then last year, I think the most recent, I went full mobile, and I was, it really put a spotlight on how, like, everyone thinks the crossbow is like some big advantage, and it has its advantages, but I didn't have $1,000 crossbow. I had a $400, I don't even know what I forget the name of it was. And it was heavy, and it was bulky, and being in the tree, like trying to be mobile and moving all over the place. So it was just a pain in the butt. And then like last year, I wounded 2 bucks, and one of them, I think the first one, I was up hunting in public ground during the rut. I left the farm. I know it's as dumb as that sounds. I left during the rut and went up to public ground, and I was hunting up there. My wife calls me, and she's like, there's a shooter buck right across the road from my house, and we'll get into this little wood lot across the road from my house in the story in a second. But she's like, there's a buck. He's been chasing does all morning. You need to come home. He's right across the road from the house. So I drive an hour and 20 minutes home. I get home at like noon, and she's like, this is trick-or-treating. And this is the first year I had my kid. She's like, we got to go trick-or-treating at 4 o'clock, so you've got to be back here by 4.
She calls you, tells you to come home, but then she's like, oh, we got to go trick-or-treating.
Yeah. Well, I was coming home anyways, but she's like, you need to come home early and try to shoot this buck. So I get home, I get all my gear set up, and I get crawling into the woods. It's blowing out of the south, the wind is, and I get on the north side of the woods, and we have cattle. It's by a cattle pasture, and we have a lane that goes along that woods. Well, I get in that lane, and I belly crawl along the lane, and I get into the woods. I get set up inside the woods where I think I need to be, and I crawl up the tree 15 feet, and I look over, and there's this buck bedded down 55 yards away. So I did the impossible. I belly crawled into his bedroom. I got set up 55 yards from him, and there he is. Well, get my crossbow up, and I'm just like, no, he's too far away. I grunt at him, and he comes to 2 yards. Well, there's a limb right in front of me, and I'm trying to get away from it with my saddle. I'm leaned way out away from the tree. I shoot. The crossbow hits the limb, and it messes with my shot, and the shot goes right underneath him. The buck jumps and runs towards me closer. So I'm in the tree with the crossbow, trying to recock the thing. Recocked it, and I think he's quartering to me at ways, but in reality, looking back on it, he was pretty broadside, and I shot him where I thought was a good shot, and it ended up being center mass and blah, blah. We didn't find him. And then I did the same thing later on. I think like just a couple days later, I got done working in the morning. I went to go drive around, and I'm like, I'll take my rattling horns and I'll walk back into this little piece. This is kind of just down the road from where most of our farm ground is. And I'm like, walk back into this little sand pit. There's a little high spot, and the deer cross right through there. Well, I'm back in there 5 minutes. I hit the horns. Next thing you know, here comes a shooter buck chasing a doe right in front of me. I'm sitting on the ground on top of this little hill, like stuck out like a sore thumb. Well, he didn't care. He come running down into the middle, and I grunted, and I stopped him, and I pull up and shoot. And I did what I've done before. I get target panic, and I pull up the scope, and I thought switching from a compound to a crossbow was going to take all that away. I was just going to be able to look in the scope with the crosshairs on them, and it was going to be the end of my problems. Well, it didn't. It just is the same thing. You just pull up, I'd get them in the scope, boom. Well, so that's a little bit of the struggles from
where. So where were you when you're shooting these deer and wounding them? Like, where are you hitting them? Like
center mass.
Like,
and I'm
back
in my
of
head,
center mass, or because a lot of guys shoot center mass and it's like a double lung kind of thing, or is it more gut?
Gut center mass.
Okay.
The second one I hit on the ground, I thought I smoked him, but in my head this whole time, because I had penetration issues with the crossbow on a couple of them that I've wounded in previous years.
Yep. So
in my head this past year, this has been last season, I'm in my head, I'm just like, stay away from the shoulder. Stay away from the shoulder. Stay away from the shoulder.
So that's like a burden too. It's like when you go to full draw or in your crossbow, bearing down the crossbow, it's like you're worrying about that shoulder, and it kind of brings you closer to the shoulder or takes you farther away, way too far, Way
too far. And that's what I think was happening with me as I was in my head. I'm just thinking, don't hit that shoulder. Remember what happened last year? Like, don't hit the shoulder. And then I was doing the opposite. I was going too far back on a deer. And I was getting pass-throughs, but it was passing right through where the deer weren't going to die. And both the deer, the first one I hit, I gave 12 hours. And I left the woods. We walked I drove around that woods all day. Never came out. My wife was watching when it happened. So I'm like, give him 12 hours. He hadn't come out of the woods. I'm like, he's going to be dead. No, he wasn't. We looked in the woods and looked. So coming into this season, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I got to redo my whole thing. Like,
did you ever look into anything like coming into this season? Like, okay, I need to really hone in on my shooting skills and like slowing the moment down in the moment. Like, what were those things that you took? Maybe some information, reading, watching videos. Like, what did you do to like kind of get you prepared for that moment?
I listened. There's some podcasts I listened to. Like, I think Bo Martonic had a podcast a while ago, just talking about target panic and just listening to podcasts and just practicing. Like, I never practiced enough with my crossbow because I could just pull the crossbow up.
It's kind of, people think it's the easy button kind of thing.
Yeah, Yeah, you think it's an easy button, and it's. I mean, at least for me, it wasn't. But this year, I'm like, I'm going back to compound. Like, I want to redo my arrow setup. I want to be able to aim where I want to aim, like in the vitals, not worry about that shoulder, and just I want 2 holes in a deer, and I want to be able to not worry about that shoulder because I want to be hunting from the ground. Like, going in this year, I really wanted to. I built my whole setup to be able to hunt off the ground and hunt mobile with my saddle and sticks. Yeah. So going into this year, that was my main focus.
Yeah, and going with a heavier setup is, I know it's kind of the cool thing to do now, and everybody's like, oh, I'm not gonna be clingy. I did it. I think I might even go a little heavier next year, but I went to a single bevel broadhead, and I couldn't be any happier. I'm not gonna lie to you. I shot a Rage for 12 years. Have no issues with a Rage. I do not. Mm-hmm. I've killed a lot of deer with them. Lost 2 deer, with them in 12 years, and but my whole thing was I wasn't passing through deer. Like, the arrow was not zipping through deer. I was sticking, the arrow in deer, hitting the offside shoulder, hitting a shoulder, and I was still recovering them, but I'm like, I kind of want to try something different. And this year, dude, my Ohio buck, and I know a lot of people have heard it, I shot him right in the chest, and it zipped right through him. Like, this setup I have is deadly. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yep. And like I think I'm heavier than you are this year. I'm at 652 grains with a 200 grain single bevel on the front.
You're throwing a Peterbilt out there. I'm more of like a 1 ton truck right now.
I heard, I forget where I heard it, but they were talking about like the way deer react when they're hit with an arrow. Like, if a deer is hit lethally, but it's got an arrow hanging out the side of it, and it only went through halfway, that deer's going to run like a raped ape,
It sends
screaming
him
because it's got an arrow hanging out.
Yep. Yeah, it sends him in shock. Yeah.
And if that arrow just zips right through him, hits in the ground, and that deer has no idea what the hell just happened, he's going to trot off 20, 30 yards and go, oh, and fall over and die.
Yep.
And that's exactly what my deer this year. He went 20 yards and died.
Yeah,
so,
my Illinois deer did that. You know, I thought I missed him. It zipped through him, and he ran away with his tail up, like bounding off, ran to 50 yards. I'm like, shit, I just missed him, like low. And he piled up right there. My Michigan deer shot him, zipped right through him, and I watched him walk 30 yards, and then I could tell I hit him in the guts. But that was my own fault. But he had no idea that an arrow just went through him. And then when he did feel it, I watched him walk, you know, because he was starting to get sick. But there is something behind that, man. I firmly believe in that.
Yeah, and that may be a lethal hit, and he might only run 200 yards, but that 200 yards, he might plug up. He might take a left when you think he took a right, and it might make it a lot harder to find that deer, even though it was a lethal hit.
Yep, for sure. No, I agree. Okay, so let's get back on track here. A little rabbit hole. That's fine, though. So coming into this year, you know, you're shooting a lot more. You're practicing. You're getting ready for that moment. Like, when did it hit you, like, okay, I am dialed. Like, you know, I am ready.
Well, it didn't hit me till that deer was dead, because I didn't have anything to prove it to myself yet that I could do it again, you know, or I could do it. So it was just a lot of practice, and I think shooting my bow during season is something I need to do more of, and that I haven't done enough of in the past. That gave me a little bit more confidence, just like, because there's times where in season you might not shoot your bow for 2 weeks, and it just gets in your head like, is it still sighted in?
For sure.
Well, remember when I was lowering that down the other day and I kind of bumped it? Like, did I bump it off? Or like, just having that little reassurance, I guess, you know, in the back of my head, that helped out a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's something I did, not to refer back, but my Illinois buck, 2 days before I shot him, I went out and I'm like, I hadn't shot from an elevated platform since like middle of the summer. And I'm shooting and from an elevated platform and then I shot up to 60 yards just to make sure I was good. At 48 yards, I Robin Hooded an arrow, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we're good. We're good here. We got confidence, you know. So yes, I agree. That goes a long way. And even if you throw 4 or 5 arrows down the pipe, you know, that's all you really need, just to give you that reassurance. I agree.
Yep. I shoot just like one. Like I try to just make one shot count when I like do it. Like I walk up to the house after work and I'd grab my bow and just, you know, one shot, act like this is going to be the shot you're going to shoot this deer.
Yep.
And you don't need to go shoot 40 arrows a day to, you know, keep yourself sharp. Just shoot a couple, shoot a handful.
One cold shot. Clint Casper does one cold shot. You know, he loves to, in the morning, he'll get up and he'll just throw a cold shot out at a target that he doesn't know how far it is. He guesses. You know, it's like, okay. So.
Well, that's a pretty good way to reenact the hunting situation.
For sure.
Because you don't get to warm up when you're getting ready to shoot a buck.
Right, exactly. So take me through October. Like what's going on, like leading up to the day?
Well, starting off, like I said, I had my kid the day before, so opening day was.
You're batting 1,000 then.
So I didn't bow hunt till I think it was like the 16th of October. I didn't go out hunting. Just with work, we were doing harvest and having a kid. In early part of October, it was like more in the middle. I got sick in the first part of October and thought it wasn't COVID, got better. And then middle part of October, I got COVID and I was pretty freaking sick but I still went hunting. I still went out and still worked. And so I didn't get to hunt as much as I wanted to, obviously, just with the kid. And I throw a couple sits. You know, I think I only sat 5 or 6 times before the day that I got my deer, and I think most of those sits were in the evening. I don't know if I had hunted a morning yet until that day. Maybe once. I don't know. I can't remember.
So were you seeing the bucks that you want to see, or were you getting close, or how was that shaking out?
I hadn't seen a deer yet that I wanted to shoot on stand. I was seeing some decent 2-year-olds. I was seeing a deer, just I wasn't seeing any deer that I wanted to see on the farm. So the piece I went out where I got the deer is not a part of the farm. It's just a free permission. Me and a buddy hunt out on it. So I was just looking to kind of change things up, honestly.
Did you have cameras on that piece that's not part of the farm?
I had one camera out there all summer. I think I pulled it sometime in late August or something.
Okay.
I had it out there all summer, and I had nothing but does, and I had 2 twin spikes, and the spikes were maybe 3 inches. Those are the only deer with any sort of antler on top of their head that I had on camera.
Break down this farm then. What does this consist of?
So it's 160 acres, and it's all farm ground. They literally went around the outside of it with a brush hog this year and pushed back it's all woods around it. And they had already taken out damn near every tree possible on the piece to maximize the farm ground. And this year they took a brush hog and brushed back all the brush that had kind of grown in a little bit. So we have, what do we got? 3 tree stands on that piece. And that's probably the only 3 trees that are, that you can put a tree stand in. I wouldn't even say they're in good spots. They're just there because it's the only spot we can put a tree stand.
Right. So what's the crop on the ground this year?
It's in a potato and corn rotation. So this year it's corn, and the corn is actually still up. It's December 1st, and it's all still up still.
Okay.
But
so, I mean, what would be your game plan then? I mean, obviously corn, you got standing corn. It's like, hell yeah, like
right.
This is going to make it a little better. What was your game plan going into the rut, I guess, or in figuring out how to kill something on here? And I guess, why did you even go hunting if you didn't know anything was there?
So I went out there the night before. The night before I killed the deer, I went out there the night before, and I was just looking to kill some time, honestly, because I gotten out of work and it was too late to go sit anywhere. So I'm like, well, I'm going to drive out here. I'll grab the decoy and my rattling antlers, and we'll go walk out there, and we'll find a spot to sit up. Maybe we can rattle something in. So I drive by the field, and right off the main road, the neighbor's corn is half gone. So I'm like, ooh, okay, that's interesting. Some corn is gone. That might get some deer moving. And there is a little corner. It's like 6 acres that is timber there, but it's like right on the corner of the road. It's all like popple trees that are no bigger than your forearm. So you really can't hunt on this spot. Sorry, it sounds like an alarm going off.
I don't hear it.
So, yeah, it was me. So I am like, I'm going to go sit up by this little spot. There's some brush right there. So I kind of lied when I said it's all tillable. There is this little, but it's right on the corner of this paved road and this other road.
It's at a T corner, right?
Yeah, it's at a T corner.
Yep.
So I'm like, I'm going to go set up downwind of this spot. And maybe I can rattle something out of there. Well, as I'm driving by there, I see this little, I don't know, it's like a little 4-point. I'm like, okay, all right, maybe he's satelliting something a little nicer. I'll go around the back side and I'll get set up. Well, I get in there and I get the decoy set up, and I'm hiding right on the edge of the corn, and I'm hiding behind this little bush. So I don't rattle the horns or anything. I just take my grunt call and I start grunting, and I start taking the horns and just raking the brush. And I'm clearing a spot where I can sit at the same time with the horns, making like a scrape. So I'm clearing out the ground, so I don't have anything to make any noise.
What day is this? What time of year is this?
This is October 29th, the night before.
Okay.
And I don't know, 5-10, maybe not even 5 minutes. Maybe 2 minutes goes by after I get done making this scrape. I catch deer coming my way, and I'm like, oh crap, here we go. So I get my phone out, and I can tell it's a decent buck, but it's not what I was looking for. But I told my buddy I hunt with, I said, if I get a basket 8 that comes into this setup tonight on the ground, I'm smoking them. I'm like, it's gonna be cool and be on the ground. I'm like, so I'd smoke him. So he comes in, and he's a 2-year-old basket 8, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it.
That's good.
So I I acted like it was the real deal, though. I pulled back the bull behind the brush, and I stood up, and he was at like 20 yards, and that 2-year-old about shit himself when he seen me stand up. He looked at me, and oh crap, and he bounded off, and I'm like, well, that was probably the nicer buck that maybe I envisioned that little deer satellite. Maybe that was the deer that was with the doe. In my head, I was thinking that anyway. So I'm like, I got to back out of here, and I want to drive by that cut cornfield before it gets dark, and I just want to see if there's any deer coming out to it. So I drive by there, like it's like probably not shooting right left, but I can see deer out there. There's like 100 deer out there. So I'm like, oh boy, I gotta hunt here in the morning. I gotta get on the edge of our corn, which is still standing, and their cut cornfield somewhere. There's a fence row that goes in between this two fields that's 10 or 15 yards wide, and it's got olive every once in a while and some smaller trees. So it's kind of a dirtier fence row.
Yep.
And that was cutting that off. So I'm like, I got to get in that fence row somewhere, and, I'll just sit up and maybe I can make a move on a deer if there's a good deer out there. So I go home that night, and the wind is not ideal. Like, I know that back corner where I have to be, it's got a rock pile. It's got a bunch of junk in it, and I know the deer come in and out of that field right in that corner. So I'm like, I got to get down there. Well, the wind just wasn't going to let me do it. It was blowing out of the northeast, but more north than east.
Yep.
So it was going to blow right out into that cut field. So I'm like, unless the deer walks right, reads the script, if anything is out in that field, I'm going to blow it right out, and it's going to be pointless for me to sit out there. So that night, I'm like, well, all right, I'll take the decoys. And there's at one end of the cornfield, we call it the Walnut Grove. It's the neighbors. It's got a bunch of olive growing up, and it's like planted walnut trees. Well, the walnut trees are probably 100 years old, and it's real thick in there. And it looks like great bedding cover. I've never been in there, but it looks great.
Yep.
So I was sitting up right at the point of that where it goes out into that field that morning. So I got out. Well, to start that morning, I ended up having to breed a cow for work at 4:30 in the morning. So I had to wake up, and this was before the time change. So my cousin was supposed to drop off the decoys that night before, and I was going to use them in the morning. Well, he forgot to drop them off because they went to a Halloween party and had a few too many lattes and forgot to drop them off. So after I got done breeding that cow, I'm like, I'll just drive into town. He lives 20 minutes from me. So I'm like, I'll have plenty of time before light. I'll drive into town. I'll grab the decoy. I'll swing by McDonald's. I'll get a coffee and a McMuffin. It'll be a great start to the morning. And this was like the first day my wife had like given me permission to like go hunt for the day. Like, it was my weekend off of work. So it was gonna be a day. Like, later on in the day,
you're looking forward to this day.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. So later on that day, I was supposed to head up to that public piece and go throw a sit at that. Well, I get to McDonald's, and the people at McDonald's, it says it's open. I sat in the freaking line for 15, 20 minutes, like banging on the doors. I called them. I could see people walking around in there. I wanted a freaking coffee. Well, they finally, someone comes walking out, and I'm like, hey, are you guys open? Oh, no, we don't open for another hour. And I'm like, and it says they're open. The lights are on, drive through. So I'm pissed. And my morning's off to a terrible start. So I grabbed the decoys, and I'm still out there in plenty of time because it was before the time change, and it didn't get light till like 8 o'clock or whatever it does.
What are you using for decoys?
I had a Montana. It's just a 2D fabric decoy. It's got stakes stick in the ground.
A buck or a doe?
It's a buck and a doe.
Okay, gotcha.
And the buck is just a little old, stupid-looking 4-point small buck. So I get set up there in the morning, and I'm set up so my wind is it's not blowing out into the field. It's kind of crosswind, but I'm far enough to the west that I'm not putting any scent out in the field. I set the buck and the doe decoy up right on the edge because I can't shoot on the other side of the fence row, so I got him just on our side. And I sat there. A bunch of deer came out in the field. There's a couple small bucks, a couple does. And like it gets to like 8:30 that morning. and I'm getting impatient already. I'm already getting impatient, and I'm just like, I've already made a couple grunt, a couple rattle sequences, and because I'm trying to be aggressive, trying to force the issue here.
Have you seen any deer yet?
I've seen a couple small bucks, but they're like 400 yards away, other side of the field. Yep. I'm not seeing anything close. So as soon as I'm like getting impatient, I look up, and here he comes out of the corner of the woods, right where I wanted to sit up that morning. So I'm just like, oh my God, it would have been perfect. He would have came. I'm beside myself.
How far is he away?
He's like 400 yards away, and I can clear as day see a big old rack on top of his head. So I called my buddy that I hunt out there with, and I'm just like, you're never going to believe it. I'm like, that spot I wanted to get to. I'm like, he came right out, and I'm standing there talking on the phone, just pissed. And then I'm just like, he's sitting there just feeding, not doing anything. I thought he was going to come out, work a scrape, chasing deer around, and, go about his business and not come in, off out of my life. He was going to go. He comes out there and he's just kind of mingling around. He did come out and check a scrape. He was up on his back legs working the licking branch, but then he just was like feeding. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, like he's not paying any attention to what's going on. I'm like, I got to try to cut some distance because I don't think he can see the decoys from where I'm at, just because the way the angle he was at and the way the brush was in the fence row. I'm like, I don't think he can see what's going on. So I grab the buck decoy, I crawl up to the buck decoy, and I grab my bow and my release, and I leave everything else where I was at. And I'm belly crawling. Well, I'm not belly crawling. I'm like on my knees holding the decoy in front of me, like going down the fence row. And I'm trying to be quick as I can because I don't want to take my time. I want to get where I think I need to be, which was like another 150 yards up. It was the low spot in the field, and the deer always want to come in and out of the low spot of the field, generally, in my experience.
Yep.
So, and I could tell the way the crops were right there, that all the corn right there was real browsed down, like for the first 10, 15 rows. So you could tell deer had been coming in and out of that spot all year. So I belly crawled down to that spot, and as I'm coming down this, the trail here, because there's a heavy deer trail on our side, and I haven't even walked on this side of the property since last hunting season. I haven't even set foot out there on this side of the road. The field's on two different sides of the roads, and I'm on the east side of the field. So I'm like, man, there's a lot of good deer tracks in that. I'm like, that looks like a big buck track. And I'm like, I think this is the spot. I put the decoy in the corn, like 2 or 3 rows, because the corn's real short, so he can see it clear as day. And I got it to where there was like a gap in the brush. So I'm like, all right, I think he can see this decoy from where I'm at. And I crawl back to where there's some trees. And while I get to these trees, and lo and behold, I look, and these trees are just rubbed all the hell, like waist high up to the middle of my belly. I'm just like, this has got to be his rub. I'm like, I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to let him see this decoy and let everything unfold in front of me. So I'm standing there in this brush, and this brush is like not tall enough that I can stand up and not be seen. So I've got to kind of crouch a little bit. So I'm like doing like the splits almost, but I'm standing there just so I lower myself enough to just get up over it. And I'm watching him. He's working my way. And every once in a while, he'd pick his head up and look right over at me. And I'm like, okay, I think he's seeing the decoy. So I'm like, I'm just going to shut up and let him do his thing. And he's working my way. And there's a strip of corn in the middle of this field that they left up that's probably 20 rows wide, but it's the whole length of the field, which is like a half mile. So in my head, I'm just thinking he's going into that corn, that strip, and that's where he's going to be the rest of the day. But he's still working right at me. So I'm just like, all right, it's happening, I think. And he gets to, and I cut the distance from probably about 300 at the time to about 150. So I got pretty close to him before I said, like, okay, this is going to be the spot. Yep. Yeah, I didn't want to get any closer. So he's veering my way, and every once in a while I poke my head back up and look, and he's at 100 yards. And when he gets to 100, because I ranged some stuff as soon as I got to that spot, because I'm like, I need to know the ranges, because I'm not going to have time to range him when he gets in. I need to already have an idea of what's going on around me. So as he's coming in the whole time too, I'm snapping branches off behind me, and I'm clearing a path so I don't make any noise if I've got to stand up or move while he's coming in. And he gets to 100 and he cuts into where the brush is at. There's a bunch of brush right there, so I lose sight of him. So I'm like,
he's still coming your way though. Like he's committed.
He's still coming my way. Like he's committed. I think he's committed. I think when I got to 150 and got settled back in and looked up, he was like looking right at me and not having a care in the world. But he was fixed on that decoy. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And he cut into that side, and I lost sight of him. And it was probably only 30 seconds go by, but it felt like an hour. And I wasn't seeing him, and I was just like, oh, God, he just went into the corn, and I'm going to lose him, and I'm not going to see him again. So I'm like, do I grunt? Do I rattle? What do I do? Well, I poked my head back up, and there he is at 80 yards. I could just see a rack.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm like, oh, God. Oh, this is really going to happen. So I get down on my knees, and I get knocked, and he's coming in. I poke back up, and he's at like 50. And the whole time in my head, I'm thinking this isn't happening. Like,
so he's coming down the corn edge, right?
Yep, he came into our side, and the farmer didn't farm right up to that fence row. There's like enough room. It's probably 30 inches, like a corn row, where the deer are walking right on the edge of the corn.
Yep.
It's like a beat down cattle path.
Yep.
So he's coming right down that, and then I duck down when he's at 50, and I'm like, next time I pop up, this is probably going to have to be it. Well, I just poked my head up a little bit. And he's right next to the decoy.
Oh God!
And he's got his head up, and I think he's looking at me because he could probably see my head bobbing around, trying to see what the hell is going on. So he gets up next to that decoy, and I'm on my knees, and I go to full draw while I'm still on my knees, and I just stand up, and he's facing quarter and hard at me. So with my arrow set up, I said, I'm putting it on that right shoulder that's facing me, and I'm sending this bitch. And I pulled the trigger on my thumb release, and he turned so fast that I thought I hit him way back. Or missed him completely. Because when he's facing you like that, the slightest change in angle completely changes where that shot's going to go.
Yep.
So I'm just like, oh my God, I missed him, or I hit him in the ass. So he runs off like 20 yards, and I can only see his rack, and he stops. I'm just like, yep, I screwed up. I did it again. And here we go again. And so I grab my binoculars, and I kind of step out off to the side a little bit where I get a better angle, and I see blood on his exit wound, but it's way back. And I'm just like, all right, there's blood. Then next thing I hear, and I'm like, oh God. Then his ass starts wobbling and falls over. And I'm just like, oh, no way. No way that this just happened.
Oh
I've never had a deer fall within sight. And even when he fell over, I was sitting there waiting for him to get back up. Like get back up and run. You know what's going to happen. Like he just probably tripped. He probably tripped, and he's just going to get up and keep walking.
Stubbed his toe. Like I've been here before.
So I'm like, oh my God, there's no way that just happened. Yeah.
So when he came into you and he was sitting at the decoy, did he bristle up at all? Or was he trying to fight, or was he like?
He was all. I couldn't see him all that well because I was trying to stay so low. So most of the time, the only thing I could see was like his neck and up. But from what I could see, he looked like he was full alert, bristled up, like head cocked a little bit. But when I stood up, he looked up at me and was just like, what are you? And I don't know how, it didn't take me long to settle in, obviously, but the whole time this is happening, I'm going through my head, slow down.
Yep.
Slow down. Like,
yep.
This is actually happening. Slow down. Like, don't rush the shot. Like, he doesn't know you're here. No, just slow down. You don't need to rush it.
Yep.
So when I stood up and I went back, I'm like, just pick a spot, slow down. So my wife just kept telling me all season, it's like, because we talked about like how the target panic, she's like, just take it in your head, slow down. So in my head, I'm sitting there, slow down. And well, it worked because I didn't hit him in the shoulder, and I wanted to hit him in the shoulder because the night before, I forget what YouTube channel did it, but they did like a comparison, like penetration wise with fixed and expandables and blah, blah, blah. And I got in a couple discussions with my buddies, and I'm like, I can't wait till I'm just going to run one right through the shoulders, full pass through, bury in the ground. Like, and then I'll show you what's up. Well, very next day, I don't know how it didn't hit the shoulder, but it went right behind the shoulder. It double lunged him, and it came out the backside and buried into the ground like a foot or two.
So he wasn't quartering to you as hard as you thought then?
I think he was, but he was full alert, and when he turned so fast, I mean, it was a matter of 3 inches from it being his shoulder to just behind his shoulder.
So, like, did he whirl? Right, did he whirl when you hit the trigger, basically? Like, he was like,
pretty much.
Fuck, and then you hit the trigger, and he's, like, whirling. So, as you saw him, when you were, like, what you were thinking, he was quartering hard, but really, he was more broadside when the arrow went through him then. Right?
Yeah, when the arrow went through him, he was a lot more broadside. But it was weird because the arrow came back like behind his rib cage where he thought it would have caught at least the liver or some guts, and it didn't. It double lunged him and came out. Must have just missed the liver and out back. But that just goes to show you how much a deer can flex when you're shooting them. Like, you think you're hitting them where you're at, but it was. He whirled so fast that's what happened.
That's crazy, dude. So.
Yep.
He trips and stubs his toe, and he's bleeding all over. So obviously he expired. How far did he go?
Yeah. I didn't pace it off, but he probably couldn't have ran more than 20 to 40 yards.
Wow, that's
but
awesome.
he got to like 20 where he bounded, and then he just stopped.
Yeah.
And the arrow went through him so quick, he had no idea what happened. He stopped, flicked his tail, then started walking back to where he came from.
Yep.
And I was just like, oh my God, like, he's going to just walk out of my life. Well, he didn't know what happened. He was a dead man walking.
Yeah, dude, there's something behind that. There's something about that arrow blitzing through him, and they have no idea. And he was rutted up too. He was getting ready to kick someone's ass.
Right.
How before we get to the walk up, how did you set the decoy up? Like, what way was the decoy facing? Like, how was your setup there?
I had it angled like at like a 45-degree angle from where he would have been coming from, because just with it being 2D, I didn't want to angle it sideways for him to because just with the way he was coming, I wanted it at a 45. Well, he was gonna have to come downwind to me. I went downwind, and I didn't think he was gonna loop back out around me.
Yep.
Once he crossed, so he couldn't have caught my wind, and I had it upwind to me probably 10 yards is the way I had it set up. So just in my head, I'm like, I'm going to put it up there 10, 15 yards. I'm going to get downwind, and hopefully he comes right down the pipe.
So the wind was coming from him to you then?
Yep. He walked. Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. He did not have the wind in his favor. And another little side note here, a couple weeks ago, I was out stalking around, and I walked up on a bedded buck, and I watched the buck come up out of the stick stuff, kicked this doe off of where she was feeding. He fed around, he bedded down, and then he faced upwind where he came from. He never once looked downwind of him in the open timber. Really? Yeah. I mean, he was a 2-year-old, but that was an interesting little behavior thing that I saw. And I was just like, you would have never thought, common logic says the buck's going to bed down, then he's going to look, downwind where he can't smell. Yeah, for sure. So this all transpires. You're probably like a little schoolgirl if you're anything like me, just dancing around, throwing your bow, yelling. Yep. So let's do the walk up. Like, what happened? What's your emotions like? I didn't even go up to him right away. I just called my buddy who I hunted out there with, and I was like, dude, I got him. He's laying here dead. And he's like, how big is he? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm not going to go up to him until, I'm like, I have no idea.
He's that 3-inch Spike, the twin. He's like thing 1 and thing 2.
So I'm like, he lives just like 5-10 minutes away from there. Yep. So he's like, I'll be there in 2 minutes. Just, give me a second. So he died in the neighbor's field. So I'm like, rather than dragging him, 400 or 500 yards, I'm like, we'll walk up. And, we walked up, me and him together, and I thought he was just going to be a straight 8, but he ended up being 9-point, and he was as big as I thought he was. So and I was, what was he? Needless to say, he's a 9-point. He's got 5 on the left and 4 on the right. He's got kind of short brow tines. Yep. But he's a 3-year-old, and we've never shot a deer off that piece. We've hunted it for like 4 years. and I've never seen a buck this nice out there on the hoof yet either.
Yep.
So,
did you put a tape on him?
Yeah, he's right at around 120.
Oh, badass, dude. That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, he'd score a lot nicer if his brow tines were more than an inch long, but I really don't care. He's a 3-year-old. He's got 8-inch 2s, 8-inch 3s. Yeah. He's got 20-inch beams.
Well, and the reason why I asked, score doesn't, it means something, but for people listening, it kind of paints a picture of like, okay, yeah, that's it gives a good idea of how big the deer is.
Right. And I want to have a goal of 130 and better. Like, that's what I shoot for. But I don't have very many of these 120s on my wall yet. So, and I pretty much am shooting for 3 years and older. Yep. And he's 3 years old. So,
well, dude, it's a stepping stone. Like, yep. It's the deer I shot in Michigan this year. He gross scored at 118, and he's a 4-year-old all day. Like, yep. That's, around us, a 4-year-old doesn't come around every day.
No.
Nope. And it's like, he's just, a lot of people might look at him and be like, that's a shit rocket. But I'm like, that's a trophy to me. Like, that's a hammer, Yep. And yeah, I want to kill the biggest deer in the country, but like you said, having a goal of 130, I don't have a lot of 130s running around. I didn't have one on camera this year in Michigan, so the top 10% of my bucks are going to be that 110 to 120 range. So it's like, that's where I'm setting my goal. Now, I'm going to adjust that a little bit. If one shows up and I don't get excited about it, then I'm not going to shoot that deer. But that's what I'm shooting for. And everybody else's, scenarios are different. We have mutual friends that have probably some of the best hunting ground in central Michigan that shoot toads every year. And they're the ones looking at you like, why would you shoot that? And it's like, well, I don't have a scenario like you. I don't have thousands of acres, and so it is what it is.
Yep. And like the spot out there, everyone around, like your family farm's not too far from there where you
poached a deer off of our place.
Yeah, that's right. You gotta tell your listeners that I snuck out right by where you hunt and pulled this bad boy out of there.
You were on, I hunt on it would be the east side of the section. You killed him on the west side of the section.
Yeah. There's a few properties in between you and us, but
hey, I'm happier than hell for you, man. That's awesome for you to do that. And the thing is you went through a lot. And every hunter does it. Just a lot of people aren't as honest about it as everything's a big freaking secret. But for you to come on here and say like, yeah, dude, I fucked up. I pussed up how many deer in the last how many years, and you know, and you even said it like, I thought the crossbow was the easy button. I'm glad that you went back to the compound and really like started getting primitive and really trying to like hone in on it, because that tells me it's like, okay, yeah, you're fucking serious about it. Let's go. Take the next step kind of thing.
Yep.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations. That's badass.
Yep, I appreciate it. I'm sitting here holding them in my hand right now, looking at them.
Probably strapped in your truck with the seatbelt and.
Yeah.
Shit, yeah. Hell yeah, man. Well, congratulations, and I think we're going to cut this loose here. I appreciate you coming on and doing this, dude.
Yep, anytime. Hopefully I got another good story for you next year.
Go shoot that spike, and then we'll talk about that.
Hey, I'm not done this year. I got some of that public up north of here. That one buck's, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was alive the day before rifle season, so
yeah.
See what the Orange Army left for me up there.
There you go. Get up there and kill one, man.
Yeah, you got to get your 4th buck yet this year. So
well, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm falling into that place of like house build, and then my cameras have completely died, and well,
that's the story of gun season in Michigan, right there.
100%. But I'm like excited to go up to my family farm around where you killed this deer, and I just want to go through a hang and bang somewhere and. Some thermal cover when it gets real cold. I love bow hunting in the snow. So, maybe the next week or two, I'm going to start throwing a couple sits at it and see what happens. I might shoot the first spike that comes by just so I can have a 4-buck here.
Hey, don't shoot those twin spikes out there.
Those are future 200s, man.
That's right.
Well, good deal, man. You have a good rest of your week, and appreciate it again.
Yeah, good luck the rest of the year if you try to make her out.
Thanks, man. All right, there you have it. Thank you very much, Kevin, for coming on. That is greatly appreciated. What a story. the struggle is real. A lot of people relate to that. A lot of people just don't want to admit it. A lot of people won't come on and say, hey, this is happening. I'm glad he did it. He's growing. He's getting more experienced, and he's learning a lot. So that says a lot. So congratulations to him again. And thank you guys, everybody, for all the downloads and all the reviews. It is greatly appreciated. And don't forget, we'll be right here next week on the Fall Podcast.